Now, for the patriots out there, our next speaker is here to stand up for all Australians. Put your hands together for the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, spokesperson for Fair Australia, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price.
It's always wonderful to be here at CPAC in front of an incredible crowd as yourselves. With so many, of course, proud Australians like myself. You know, this week my team have been getting bombarded with media requests. Journos looking for comment about the controversial and extreme CPAC conference. Whew. The lefty establishment, the corporate elites, the mainstream media, they are all terrified to know there is a room like this full of Australians who are completely unafraid to show their support for conservative politics in our wonderful nation. They are terrified to know there are people across this country ready to stand up and fight for mainstream Aussie values, right? But I look at a room like this one and I am filled with hope and with gratitude, both for our cause and this country that I love so much. Gratitude to the people who have put this event together today. Thank you so much to everyone, Andrew Cooper, all the gang. Gratitude to my colleagues also, those of you that are present, those of you who have had my back on the Senate floor, and who I'm very proud to fight alongside, of course, in Canberra. But mostly, gratitude to every one of you who has come out today because you love this country also. I'm also really grateful for a particular Scotsman who loves this country. Actually, I must apologise. He's a Scozzy. He's a proud Scozzy. A very proud Scozzy who has joined us on this journey, who has decided to share the target on his back also, and who absolutely has had my back. My husband, Colin Lilly, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, but you all did hear him in the very beginning, reciting a wonderful poem about the love of this country. As we've travelled this country, we are just in awe of the incredible opportunities that Australia provides for everyone. And I know that it's why you're all here today, because of our shared love for Australia. Now, I know you're probably all wondering what I'm going to talk about today, because there's not been a whole lot going on in the area of Indigenous affairs, has there? Well, sadly, there actually hasn't been. There are no plans, no ideas and no action. There's been absolutely nothing done to improve the lives of our most marginalised Australians. But instead, we have a Prime Minister so concerned with his own popularity that he's willing to tear apart the country for some applause from the media and, of course, his corporate elite mates. Shame. Labor's voice, the voice of the elites, the voice of politicians, Albo's attempt to distract from the fact that he's done nothing. That's all it is. It's a distraction from Labor's incompetence. They have no idea how to handle Indigenous issues, so they'd rather palm it off and make it something else's responsibility. I got into politics because I saw problems in my hometown, in the Northern Territory, and in my country that I thought I might be able to do something about. I put my hand up to go to Canberra because I thought I could be a voice for my community. Clearly, they did too. That's why they sent me there. It's incredibly important that we stop Labor's divisive voice. But I'd rather spend my time focusing on the Australians who really need our help, not just the minority that Albanese thinks are worth listening to. When I put my hand up, I had looked at the research. I had looked at the gap and thought maybe I could use my experience to suggest some real action, some real solutions. That's why I looked into the gap. The differences in outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians to try and understand what's going on and why. Well, let me tell you what I found. The gap is more about place than race. The gap doesn't simply exist between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. The gap exists between those who live in the cities and those who live in remote and regional Australia. It exists between the people who can walk to the 24-hour chemist or the 24-hour emergency room and those who have to hold out for the next visit from the flying doctor. It exists between those who have 10 schools in walking distance and those who have to travel 3 or 4 hours to school each day and back. It exists between those who have the ability to use their land and their resources to help their communities and those who are blocked from doing the same by red tape and activism. Well-meaning Australians are being lied to, told that the problems in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities are a product of systemic racism or colonisation, and that the answer is to listen to academics and activists from the cities. Academics and activists from what I refer to as the Aboriginal industry, the people profiting off marginalisation. At the moment, my colleagues and I are working to get an inquiry into the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land councils and governing bodies. I want to find out how the billions and billions of taxpayer dollars going into these organisations are actually being spent year in, year out. I want to know what's working and what isn't, so that we can actually properly aim our resources to help those who are most in need. And I really want to know why those land councils and organisations are so scared to have an inquiry. Because clearly, if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem with us having a look? During the last sitting period, I asked the government why so many questions were taken on notice during Senate estimates and were left unanswered 2 months later, of course. If you're unfamiliar with the term, a question can be taken on notice if the person answering it doesn't have the answer readily available. They're given a deadline to provide the answer. This government was happy to let questions go unanswered well after the deadline. Questions that my coalition colleagues and I put to them on behalf of you and all Australians and those most in need. We put questions to this government that need answers, but they are only too happy to ignore us and ignore you, as well as our most marginalised. government and government-funded bodies refusing to answer questions. There is absolutely no shortage of goodwill in this country. There is no shortage of Australians who want to see the best outcomes for their fellow Indigenous Australians who are our most marginalised. But there is a shortage of accountability. There is a shortage of accountability on the part of those who claim to be doing the work. This country has spent hundreds of billions of dollars on Indigenous affairs over the decades to try to help our most marginalised. But without accountability, without transparency, and without understanding how it is being spent and the effectiveness of these organisations, we'll not be able to improve the lives of our most marginalised. When he was the leader of the opposition, Albanese told us that Australians deserve a Prime Minister who shows up, takes responsibility, and works for the people. Well, mate, it's time to show up. It's time to take responsibility. It's time to be accountable for your government. But that's the big issue with this government, isn't it? We can't trust this government, and we certainly can't trust Anthony Albanese. We can't trust him to take accountability. We can't trust him to stand by his commitments. We can't even trust him to get across the detail of his own proposals. Mr. Albanese has made a lot of gaffes over the years, plenty of them. But to spend so much time and money on a referendum and then admit you haven't even read the entire statement? It's absolutely unbelievable. Should we take a moment here to talk about one of the most blatant attempts at gaslighting Australians that this country has seen from our government? Let's start with Professor Megan Davis, a co-author of the Uluru Statement, who has said dozens of times that the Uluru Statement from the heart is longer than one page. Well, about a dozen times, I reckon. This is how brazen the lies get. Professor Davis is on video from 2018 saying, and I quote, "So the Uluru Statement, many people don't know, is 18 pages long. Read that whole document, which we call the Uluru Statement from the heart." She's actually on video. She's on video. But the so-called fact checkers apparently haven't seen the video. You know who else was on the video saying it? Pat Anderson, another co-author, of course, who on the 30th of November just last year said, and I quote, "The Uluru Statement is in fact 18 pages long." They're out there now calling us conspiracy theorists, but they're on the video actually saying it themselves. So let me offer some help to the fact checkers, who will no doubt be listening to this speech. Contact my office if you wish, we'll give you the videos. It gets much worse. When my office spoke to the FOI team of the National Indigenous Agency, we were given verbal confirmation that the long version, titled Document 14, was the Uluru Statement from the heart. The head of that office has since backflipped. But you know, when the PM said it was a conspiracy, looking for a theory, he may have thought we were talking about something else. He probably thought we were talking about something else because he likely didn't even know what he was talking about, right? He never read it. He never read it. I think my heart goes into palpitations when I feel like I haven't, when I need to read my shadow cabinet documents the day before. You have to be across the detail. You are the Prime Minister. He's never read the documents that are the foundation of his referendum. These documents are in the Referendum Council's final report, which I guess we can all assume he might have glanced at least. They weren't even that far in, only about page 16. But he obviously didn't have a look that far. Why would I, he said. Why would I read them? Really? Is that really the response from the man pushing the most divisive referendum this country has ever seen? Why would I? We've known for a long time this bloke isn't a fan of details. He either can't remember them or doesn't want to share them, but now we really do know that. He doesn't know them. He can't give Australians any details because he can't read past the first page. This is the Prime Minister's divisive referendum, and the Prime Minister has lost all credibility. He has no plan. He has no solutions. He doesn't even know the detail, and he has surrounded himself with the likes of Thomas Mayo and Teela Reid. They don't want the best for Indigenous Australians. They want the rent paid. They want to pay their respects to the Communist Party, the elders of the Communist Party. They want to abolish Australia Day. They want reparations. They want to tear down our system. They want to punish politicians who don't listen to them. They want to divide us. And the Prime Minister is backing them because he hasn't read past the first page. Make no mistake, this is the most divisive referendum this country has ever faced. I have to acknowledge how grateful I am that the National and Liberal parties have come together to stand against this dangerous and divisive voice. As a coalition, we have taken a stand for what is right. And that is keeping our country together. I am grateful for the leadership of Peter Dutton and David Littleproud. For David Littleproud for taking our National Party room and drawing the line in the sand early in the piece. And to Peter Dutton for having the faith in me to take on such an important role as the Shadow Minister of Indigenous Australians. Labor, after all, are putting up a pretty bad proposal and using emotional blackmail and good vibes. How the two go together, really? to get 97% of the country to feel like they're passing judgment on 3% of the country. And that is just wrong. We have a fight on our hands to stop this. The polls might be going in our direction, but we cannot get complacent. We cannot rest until this is beaten. The Yes campaign are funded by the elites. Qantas are giving them free flights. The City of Sydney is giving them free office space. They're offering thousands of dollars to communities and individuals to hold yes events. Perhaps we should put in for one of those grants. Tell them that we're going to run a yes event, right? They have the corporate elites, the mainstream media, and now even government departments. And what do we have? Well, I'll tell you what we have. We have you. We have you, And we have a message of unity. We have a message of one Australia that can improve together. The score might be in our favour, but the match is far from over. We need every single one of you in this room to sign up. No doubt, you probably already signed up to volunteer, right? To talk to your friends and your family and your communities. We need every single one of you to be relentless in your opposition to this dangerous, divisive and costly referendum. Some things get said so often that they start to feel like an empty gesture. Kind of like when the plane lands and the Qantas captain tells you whose land you're on. I thought we were on everybody's land, personally. Or when the pollies breathe in the smoke at the smoking ceremony before a road opening or something, or one of those events. But I mean this. We really can't do this without you. We can't do it without your support. We can't do it without your encouragement. When you send a letter or emails to my office, through my website, my staff tell me, and some of the lovely messages of support always perks me up. I'm always very, very grateful, very humbled, sometimes a little bit emotional. But it certainly continues to push me along, because I know that you're on this ride with me. And I certainly might be the face of it, along with the incredible Warren Mundine. But you guys are the ones who really make it happen. Days like today, looking out over the room, they humble me, it humbles me, and I'm filled with pride. It reminds me why I'm here. And of course, you give me the energy I need to keep going. As you can hear in my voice, I've succumbed to whatever's been flying around the country. I've caught it while I've been flying around the country also, but it hasn't deterred me from continuing this fight. So I'm very, very grateful for you all coming here. I'm grateful, of course, to our hosts once again, to the teams backstage, everyone who has come together to believe in our cause and our fight ahead. This is where we finally, as a country, draw that line in the sand as Australians and say enough is enough. Enough with the gaslighting. Enough with the woke, insidious, cancel culture. Enough of the attack on our wonderful shared Australian values. This is the turning point, Australia. This is the point where we get to teach our kids to be proud, to be Aussie again. Let's continue to be one Australia together and not a country divided. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Ladies and gentlemen, our country is in good hands with Jacinta Nampijinpa Price for keeping them accountable. Give us a round of applause if you're voting no.